Now, as Jesus was going out of the temple courts, one of his disciples said to him, "Teacher, look at these tremendous stones and buildings." Jesus said to him, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left on another, all will be torn down." So while he was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us when all these things will happen, and what will be the sign of all these things are about to take place." Jesus began to say to them, "Watch out that no one misleads you. Many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he,' and they will mislead many. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. These things must happen, but the end is still to come. For nation will rise up in arms against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places, and there will be famines. These are but the beginnings of birth pains. You must watch out for yourself. You will be handed over to councils and beaten in synagogues. You will stand before governors and kings because of me as a witness to them. First, the gospel must be preached to all nations. When they arrest you and hand you over for trial, do not worry about what to speak, but say whatever is given you at that time, for it is not you speaking, but the Holy Spirit. Brother will hand over brother to death, and father his child. Children will rise against parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by everyone because of my name, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. But when you see the abomination of desolation standing where it should not be, let the reader understand. Then those in Judea must flee to the mountains. The one on the roof must not come down or go inside to take anything out of the house. The one in the field must not turn back to get his cloak. Woe to those who are pregnant in those days, who are nursing babies in those days. Pray that it may not be in winter, for in those days there will be suffering unlike anything that has happened from the beginning of creation that God created until now, or ever will happen. And if, if the Lord had not cut those days, no one would be saved, but because of the elect, whom he chose, he has cut them short. Then, if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Christ,' or 'Look, there he is,' do not believe them, for false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, the elect. Be careful. I have told you everything ahead of time. But in those days after the suffering, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in heaven will be shaken. Then everyone will see the Son of Man arriving in the clouds with great power and glory. Then he will send angels, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heaven. Learn this parable from the fig tree. Whenever its branches become tender and put out leaves, you know summer is near. So also you, when you see these things happening, know that he is near, right at the door. I tell you the truth, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. But as for the day or the hour, no one knows it, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, except the Father. Watch out, stay alert, for you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey. He left his house and put his slave in charge, assigning to each his work and commanding the doorkeeper to stay alert. Stay alert, then, because you do not know when the owner of the house will return, whether during evening, at night, or when the rooster crows, or at dawn. Or else he may find you asleep when he returns suddenly. What I say to you, I say to everyone, stay alert. All right, so now as Jesus was going out of the temple courts, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, at the tremendous stones and buildings." The Jerusalem temple was widely admired around the world. See Josephus and Tacitus, who called it immensely opulent. Josephus compared it to a beautiful snow-capped mountain. Oh, well, that's interesting. So the disciples are pointing out to Jesus how beautiful the temple is. Like, the timing of this seems like, why would you do it here? Okay, so this isn't one of those occasions where we don't need to think about chronology in the standpoint of making the assumption that the authors of the Gospels are putting things in chronological order. They are placing this story here right before the crucifixion, before his death, because his temple is going to be torn down. And they're, his body, which he talks about. So we have in connection close by that, the tearing down of the temple. So do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left on another. All will be torn down. The statement, not one stone left on another, Jesus predicted the total destruction of the temple, something that did occur. Not one stone left here on another will not be thrown down. Okay. So all will be torn down. Well, we have the Wailing Wall that still exists. Does that mean that Jesus was wrong? Because there's a stone on top of another. Now, Jesus is using total destruction language. The temple is going to be torn down. That's what he's doing. He's total destruction language, not literal understanding of that. So don't get caught up with people who want to go, all means all. Well, then it doesn't always all mean all. It is total, description. The same way that we will use the always and never. You always do that. You never do that. We know there's exceptions when we say always and never. We are making a point of emphasis when we say you never do that. Or I always do that. Like, we're making a point of emphasis. So don't get caught up in all means all. I've heard lots of preachers who emphasize that. And then there's passages where you can't use it to all mean all. So it's just not a good deal to make that emphasis ever, in my opinion. So while he's sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, so they're pointing out, hey, check out the building. Then they go sit opposite the building after he says the building's going to be torn down. And Peter, James, John, and Andrew, and James and John, but Chi is not translated. Oh, they're just telling us that they didn't put all the Chi's in there, because the way that the Greek would be Peter and James and John and Andrew, which is bad English. So that's all that's telling us. Interesting, Andrew. We often have Peter, James, and John. This time, Andrew's included in there. Wonder why. Anyway, tell us when these things will happen and what will be the sign of all these things that will take place. So their question is about the destruction of the temple. Remember that. We know when the destruction of the temple happens, 70 AD. Most people, I should say, not most people, most scholars will say none of the New Testament was written before 100 AD, or there's only a couple of pieces that were written before 100 AD. So this was clearly written afterwards, so they could make the prediction in there and all of those things. Well, I'm saying from a scholar position, Gaming with Yeshua. I'm not saying from a church historical viewpoint of things. So, not saying what I believe. I'm saying what they make arguments from. I think those are arguments from silence, simply because we can't date a document sooner should not take out the possibility that it is sooner. Some people will say, well, Mark has to be first. I don't happen to believe Mark is first. I think Mark is doing something entirely different with the way that he is writing, and the church historically has said Matthew was first. But anyway, as Jesus is talking about this, they're asking about the destruction of the temple. They're looking at the temple. He's addressing the destruction of the temple. We first need to put everything that he's mentioning here with the destruction of the temple. Okay? Don't just read this and go, oh, this is all future, because this part and that part and the other part didn't happen. A lot of what Jesus is going to include here are references and quotes to Old Testament passages. So he is bringing in those ideas into what he is saying about the destruction of the temple. Now, those could still have future fulfillments. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm saying read it first in light of the actual physical destruction of the temple in 70 AD. Yeah, game of the show. Think about it. If we found a copy of the Iliad in 200 AD, would we still time it to 300 BC? Of course they would. Well, yeah, and I'm just saying we have early manuscripts, but I believe 79 or 80 of a piece of John's gospel is maybe the earliest piece that we have, and it's just a small piece. It's not a full copy. Anyway, okay, so Jesus began to say, watch out that no one misleads you. Many will come in my name and say, I am he, and they will mislead many. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. These things must happen, but the end is still to come. Before the destruction of the temple, it sounds like some are going to come in my name and mislead you. So, do we see, as we're following along in the book of Acts, that people are coming along and trying to mislead people? Well, we certainly see that there is a fighting against certain different groups that come up. There is maybe not false messiahs that we see directly, but there are people doing things in Jesus' name. And, there's the 7 sons of Sceva who are using Jesus' name as a piece of being able to do exorcisms and those kinds of things. They're casting out demons in his name, but they don't know Jesus, which is kind of a weird thing. So we certainly can see the playing towards that direction, but there are going to be people who are going to claim to be the risen Jesus returning. There are going to be people, or there's going to be wars and rumors of wars. Like, you're in Rome. There's always going to be that. These things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise up in arms against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places, and there will be famines. These are just the beginning of birth pains. Okay. All of this language here is just standard day of the Lord language, okay? How do you describe a day of when God is going to bring judgment? There we go. It's cited in many different ways in the same way in the Old Testament. You must watch for yourself. You will be handed over to councils and beaten in synagogues. Do we see these things happening in the book of Acts? We certainly do. We certainly do. We have Peter and John going before the council. We see them being beaten. We have Paul being stoned. So we know of several occasions where that is actually taking place before 70 AD. You will stand before governors and kings because of me as a witness to them. Well, we know that Paul does. He goes before governors and kings. And then we have the book of Acts end before 70 AD, so we don't have conclusion of everybody. I don't have the timeline memorized of the expected or the church stories of when people died and how they died. But yes, they're going to go before governors and kings, many of them, and end up dead. First, the gospel must be preached to all nations. So when you're arrested and handed over, don't worry about what you speak. You will say at that time, you will speak what are given to you by the Holy Spirit. So we do see that in the book of in the book of Acts, when Peter and John are arrested and they're told not to preach in Jesus' name, they are given what to say at that time. And so we see that pattern. Now, first, the gospel must be preached in all nations. Has that happened today? Okay, when they're hearing all nations, though, they're not thinking about Peru. They're not thinking about South Africa. They're not thinking about Australia. They have within the Old Testament the idea of the 70 nations, or the 72, depending on how you count them, from the table of nations in the Old Testament. And then whatever nations end up being the replacement for that nation as you go forward. But Paul, that's why he wants to get to Spain, because in his estimation, that will complete the being preached to all nations. Paul, doesn't make it there. So was this a requirement before the destruction of the temple? Either we have to understand that it first must be preached in all nations is a going to, and they're on the path to it when the destruction comes. And we can say, yes, it was being preached, and it was spreading, and it was ongoing. If we're to go, no, it has to be all nations, then how do we make the distinction of when it was? So just saying, here's one of those things that's like, okay, this may not have happened before 70 AD. So either does all mean all, or it is a project that's ongoing. It must be going to all nations. Okay. A brother will hand over brother to death, and father his children. Children will rise against parents and have them put to death. I don't know enough historically to know if there's records of those things happening, but when we have Paul, who is going around with the letters and taking people up, I imagine that people were handing over family members to save themselves. So while we don't have historical validation of that, I think it's very probable. You'll be hated by everyone because of my name, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. So both the Gentiles and the Jews are coming against the Christians, and the one who endures to the end will be saved. Jesus is not claiming here that salvation is by works. Okay, no. He's talking about enduring to the end. Okay. But when you see the abomination of desolation standing where it should not be, the abomination of desolation is an allusion to Daniel 9. Though some have seen the fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy in the actions of Antiochus IV, or a representative of his in 167 BC, the words of Jesus seem to indicate that Antiochus was not the final fulfillment, but that there was, from Jesus' perspective, still another fulfillment yet to come. Some argue that this was realized in 70 AD, while others claim it refers specifically to Antichrist and will need a full realization in the period of Great Tribulation. Since Jesus is talking about, or was asked the question of when the destruction of the temple is coming, I'm going to make the assumption that it had to have been fulfilled, and he's making a reference to Daniel, something that is going to be horrible. Antiochus, I don't remember all the details, offered a pig or something along those lines in 176 BC. Jesus is making a reference that something atrocious is going to happen, and the destruction of the temple is going to follow suit. In fact, there already is a level of which that has been, by the way that Herod has ordained it with Roman symbols in that. So anyway, standing where it should not be, let the reader understand, then those in Judea must flee. So I think Jesus has something in mind. Something is going to be happening in the temple area. It's going to have some violation. When that violation happens, those in Judea must flee to the mountains. So this is going to be, let's just watch for the clues in the lifetime of the apostles. So the one on the roof must not go down or go inside or take anything out of the house. The one in the field must not return back and get their cloak. So this is going to be a time of desperate upheaval. So don't even grab stuff. Leave now. Woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing babies in those days. It's going to be difficult. Happened from the beginning of creation that God created until now, or will ever happen. Again, this is formulaic language for talking about things that are going to take place that are going to be outside of the norm of regular type of oppression that's happening. And that's what we often have. Nothing's ever happened like it before, nor will it ever happen again. And if the Lord had not cut those days short, no one would be saved. But because of the elect, whom he chose, he has cut them short. What do we have here? Cut the days short. What's interesting in this sounds a little bit like Abraham negotiating about Sodom and Gomorrah around, if there are so many righteous people, will the destruction still happen? So there's a little bit of, because of the elect whom he chose, he is cutting them short. So he's not going to go the fullness of this everywhere, but because there are elect, those who are faithful followers, the remnant, he is going to cut those days short. Then if anyone says, look, here is the Christ, or look, there he is, do not believe them, for false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, the elect. So after the destruction, after the abomination of desolation, the fleeing must take place. God's going to cut those days short, and there'll be people claiming to be the Christ, or there's the Christ. Go look. I will show you the Christ. And so there is the don't believe them. We have that at the beginning. We have that down here. Possibly this is a chiasm then. When you see that kind of formulaic thing where you have something mentioned, a whole bunch of other conversation happens, and then you have another thing here. Then you try to point where is the center of this. My thought is it might be the abomination of desolation, or it might be you'll be hated because of me. Anyway, let's keep working towards that. But in those days, after that suffering, the sun will darken, the moon will not give its light, the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in heaven will be shaken. So in those days, after the suffering, okay, and I think this, we do not need to look at physical things happening in the night sky. I think this is talk of the spiritual realm. The sun, the moon will not give its light. The stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in heaven will be shaken. It is an allusion to Isaiah and to Joel. The heavens were seen as the abode of the heavenly forces. So their shaking indicates distress in the spiritual realm, although some take the power as the reference to the bodies in heavens, like stars and planets. I don't take it that way. I take it as the spiritual realm. But when is this? Is it when 70 AD happens? Is this before that? Is this this is where we start to get things mingled together, because it says in those days after that suffering. So it's in those days, but after that suffering, then everyone will see the Son of Man arriving in the clouds with great power. So this is Daniel 7. So here we now see, okay, that doesn't happen with the destruction of the temple. Then he will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds and from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. So now we've shifted outside the realm of the destruction of the temple. Banana is a Hannah. Spot of tea. Spot of tea. It is Earl Grey all day, baby. Earl Grey all day today. Got your stream streak going. Back to sleep I go. Zack Attack, welcome in, friend. Did I see you did a tip of the cap, too? Tip of the cap, friend. Tip of the cap. Good morning, Zack Attack. Good to have you in here. Yeah, go get some rest. Okay, so learn the parable from the fig tree. Whenever its branches become tender and puts out its leaves, you know summer is near. So also, you, when you see these things happening, know that he is near, right at the door. I tell you the truth, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. So here's where we... Okay, so what does this mean? This is one of the hardest verses in the gospel to interpret. Various views exist for what generation means. Some take it to meaning race, and thus as the assurance that the Jewish race nation would not pass away. Wow, I have not heard that one. But it's very questionable that the Greek term genea could have this meaning. Yeah, I don't think it does. Generation might mean this type of generation and refer to the generation of wicked humans. Then the point is that humanity will not perish because God will redeem it. Or generation might refer to the generation that sees the signs of the end, who will also see the end itself. In other words, once the movement of the return of Christ starts, all the events connected will happen rapidly. Or, which they're not listing in here, this generation is a reference to the age that they are going to be in, the new age. That age is to come, the age where Christ is seated at the right hand of the Father, reigning and ruling in heaven until all the enemies are put under the footstool. We are living in that generation because we are in that age. And so that could be what the meaning of this is too. Or if it's meant to be literal from the standpoint of this generation, all of you who are standing here, before this generation dies out, the destruction of the temple is going to happen. Okay, but what about some of the other things that are mentioned in there? Well, we'll have to see. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. So these things are going to come true. So I think this is intentional, that there is the mixing of things that are going to happen now, and there's level 4 future things. When Peter quotes from Joel, and he talks about, in the passage is talking about the sun turning, or the moon turning red and the sun turning darkness. We can talk about that from the standpoint of it happening at the crucifixion, which is what Peter is using it to talk about. And we do see the reference to darkness during the crucifixion. We don't have any reference to the moon turning red. We don't have any description of that. So, but he still reads it in the quote. How do we understand it? We don't have to have every like what we have in mind is a checklist point of view that says if it's not included in there, then it must not have been fulfilled because it didn't happen. Like that's just not the way that the Bible was understood to work in the times it was being written in ancient times. And so we shouldn't impose that kind of an idea on it today that, oh, well, this wasn't happening and this didn't happen, so that doesn't fulfill it. I mean, that's just kind of really narrow on the way that we are to understand things. A lot of this is symbolic language. Some of it is formula around things. So the same way that we use formulas in the way that we tell stories a long time ago, wow, you know what kind of story I'm going to tell you just by that. And they lived happily ever after. You know what kind of like we have formulas that we put in there. But what does that actually mean? And they lived happily ever after. It means I don't have any more story from you. Their life was good. After all the other parts and whatever it was, from here on out, all those stuff was good, so it's not worth talking to you about, I guess. But we have those things. These are some of the things that happen on the way they talk about it in as far as the formulas of saying these things. So don't get overly caught up in a checklist mentality. That's not how they're using it, and it's not how we should understand it either. But as for the day and the hour, no one knows it, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, except the Father. What do you have here on the Son? The phrase "nor the Son" has caused a great deal of theological debate because on the surface it appears to conflict with the concept of Jesus' deity. The straightforward meaning of the text is that the Son does not know the time of his return. If Jesus were divine, though, wouldn't he know this information? There's other passages which similarly indicate Jesus did not know certain things. For example, Luke indicates that Jesus grew in wisdom. This has to mean that Jesus did not know everything at all times. And Mark also is not alone in implying that Jesus did not know certain things. The best option to understand is a similar passage is to hold the two concepts in tension. The Son in his earthly life and ministry had limited knowledge of certain things, yet he is still deity. Okay. That was a whole lot of, a lot of theological debate. The Son does not know. Well, we also have Jesus in the book of Acts saying similar things because he's using the motif there of the Father being the one that knows because the Father will send the Son. So the angels in heaven do not know. Anyway, the bigger point is to watch and stay alert. Like, I can't tell you when this is going to be. So you have to be alert. So it's not like, well, let me just give you the date and then you don't have to do anything and you don't have to pay attention and you can just wait for it to happen and then get ready. Like, do you ever do this as a kid or do your kids do this? You tell them you're going to be gone for a couple of days and you have a list of chores you need to do while you're gone. And then you come home early and they haven't done the list of chores because they weren't expecting you yet. Okay, so the giving the expected time is sometimes detrimental to actually doing the things you should be doing. For you do not know when the time will come. It's like a man going on a journey. He left his house. He put his slaves in charge, assigning to each his work and commanding the doorkeeper to stay alert. Stay alert then, because you do not know when the owner of the house will return, whether during evening or at midnight, when the rooster crows, or dawn, or else he may find you asleep when he returns suddenly. What I say to you, I say to everyone, stay alert. So the whole point of this whole last thing is you don't know when it's going to be. Stay alert. Stay alert to when Jesus is going to return. That piece certainly did not happen within the rest of this. There is what is happening here with the realm of heavens? Did that happen? If we use the Revelation language of things happening there, I take the viewpoint that all of those things could be talking about the place and timing of, from our perspective, the crucifixion taking place and the kicking out of heaven and all of that. But there's other times where it's like, when is this? So there's what we got in Mark 13.